The night my daughter poured something into my evening tea, I didn't think twice about it. She smiled at me, kissed my cheek, said, "Sleep well, Mom." I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later, tubes in my arms, my heart monitor screaming, and a detective sitting in the chair beside me, holding a file folder with my children's names on the cover. He looked at me over his glasses and said, "Mrs. Hargrove, do you know how much your estate is worth?" I built a $100 million company from nothing, from an apartment with no heat, from a woman who had nothing but her hands and her will. And my children, the ones I gave everything to, decided they were tired of waiting for me to die. So they tried to speed it along. Stay with me, because what happened next, what I found out, and what I did about it will shock you to your core. Before I go any further, if you've ever sacrificed everything for someone who repaid you with betrayal, this story is for you. Subscribe to this channel right now. We tell real, raw stories every single day that you will not find anywhere else. Like this video. It costs you nothing, and it helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. And I need you to answer this in the comments below. If your own children tried to take everything from you, your money, your life, your legacy, would you forgive them? Or would you make sure they never got a single cent? Tell me below. I'll be reading every single response. Now, let me take you back to where this all truly began. My name is Margaret Elaine Hargrove. Most people who know me call me Maggie. I'm 55 years old. I have silver in my hair that I earned, lines on my face I refuse to hide, and a story that I debated keeping silent about for the past 2 years. But silence has cost me enough already. I am a self-made woman. That phrase gets thrown around a lot these days, but I want you to understand what it actually looked like in my case. It looked like being 19 years old and pregnant, sitting on a floor with no furniture in a studio apartment in Cincinnati, Ohio, eating crackers and peanut butter for dinner because it was all I could afford. It looked like filing paperwork for my first business, a tiny event planning operation, while nursing a baby on my lap. It looked like taking out a second mortgage that terrified me so badly I threw up in the bank parking lot after I signed the papers. It looked like 26 years of 7-day weeks of missing school plays and swim meets and family dinners because a contract needed signing or a client needed handling. I sacrificed everything to build something my children would never have to suffer through. I wanted them to start their adult lives with everything I didn't have: security, opportunity, options. I gave them all of that, and they gave me a hospital bed and a police investigation in return. I was raised by a single mother in a small house in rural Kentucky. My mother was a woman of extraordinary strength and absolutely no financial luck. We weren't poor. We were the kind of broke that feels like a personality, like it's part of you. Like you're born into a house where money is something other people have. I swore at age 12, after watching my mother cry over an electric bill, that I would never feel that helpless again. At 19, I got pregnant by a man who disappeared before I even knew the results of the test. His name isn't worth mentioning. What matters is that I had my daughter, Claudia, alone in a hospital room. And I looked at that tiny face, and I made her a promise that I would give her a different life than the one I'd had. 2 years later, I met Daniel Hargrove. Danny was kind, patient, and genuinely in love with me, a combination I hadn't thought actually existed. We married quickly, had our son Marcus 18 months after the wedding. For a few years, we were genuinely happy in the specific, exhausted way that young parents are happy, barely keeping our heads above water but smiling about it. Danny worked construction. I started my event planning business out of our kitchen. By the time Marcus was in kindergarten, I was booking weddings and corporate events and pulling in enough to pay our bills comfortably. Then I had an idea that changed everything. I noticed that the catering companies I was contracting kept dropping the ball. Food arriving late, wrong menu items, unprofessional staff. I thought, what if I just did it myself? What if I vertically integrated, offered catering alongside event planning? I borrowed against everything we had. I hired 3 people. I worked from 4 in the morning until midnight, 7 days a week. Within 10 years, Hargrove Events and Hospitality had 40 employees and contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Within 20 years, we had offices in 6 states. Within 20 years, we had been acquired twice, and I had negotiated my way into majority ownership each time. When I turned 50, my financial advisor sat me down and told me my net worth between the company valuation, my real estate holdings, and my investment portfolio was $104 million. I sat in his office for a long time after he said that. I thought about the electric bill my mother cried over. I thought about the crackers and peanut butter. I thought about how much I wanted to share all of this with my children. That was my first mistake. Claudia is 36. She's beautiful in the way that makes people assume life is easy for her, and she has leaned into that assumption her entire life. She married well, or so I thought, and has 3 children of her own. For years, I believed she was content. Marcus is 32. He's charming and funny and has an MBA from Vanderbilt that I paid for. He works, or worked, as a senior VP at my company in a position I created for him because he struggled to hold down outside employment. When Danny passed away 6 years ago, heart attack, completely without warning, gone in 20 minutes, I watched my children grieve in ways that disturbed me, but that I wrote off as grief itself. People do strange things when they're hurting. What I couldn't write off was what came after. Within a year of Danny's death, Claudia began making subtle, then not so subtle comments about my estate planning. Had I updated my will? Did I have a financial power of attorney in place? Had I thought about what would happen to the company if something happened to me? I told her I had everything handled. I did. I have a team of attorneys and a CFO who eat, sleep, and breathe this company. Then Marcus started showing up to my house unannounced, not to visit exactly, to observe. He'd walk through rooms, open cabinets. I once asked if he could take a look at my filing cabinet, and I told him absolutely not. He laughed it off. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then, 18 months ago, Claudia introduced me to a man named Dr. Philip Weston. She told me he was a financial advisor, a friend of her husband's, who specializes in estate planning for high net worth individuals. She said he was doing me a favor by taking a meeting. I agreed to the meeting because Claudia looked so genuinely hopeful, and I loved her, and I thought maybe this was her way of showing she cared. Philip Weston was smooth in the specific way that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. He kept steering the conversation towards trusts, irrevocable trusts specifically. He wanted to know how accessible my liquid assets were. He asked about my health. I thanked him for his time and had my attorney look into him the following Monday morning. He was not a certified financial advisor. He was a consultant with 2 prior civil lawsuits for financial misconduct. I said nothing to my children, but I began paying attention. The night it happened was a Tuesday in March. Claudia had come for dinner. I cooked roasted chicken, the same meal I'd made for her birthday every year since she was a teenager. Marcus called to say he couldn't make it. A work thing. He sounded distracted on the phone. Claudia and I had a lovely evening. She seemed softer than she had in months. She helped me clean up. She made tea. She brought it to me in the living room, herself, which she'd never done before. I always make my own tea. I noticed it, but didn't comment. We talked for another hour. She kissed my cheek when she left, said, "Sleep well, Mom." I woke up 6 hours later, unable to lift my arms. I managed to get to my phone. My vision was blurring badly by the time I called 911. The paramedics told me later that another hour and my kidneys would have shut down entirely. When I opened my eyes in the ICU, Detective Aaron Cole was sitting beside me. He had a kind face and tired eyes and a folder with my daughter's name on it. He told me they had found the substance in my tea, a diuretic compound, massively overdosed, mixed with something that suppresses the immune response. It mimics the signs of age-related organ failure. It is not easy to detect unless you're looking for it. Someone was looking for it. A toxicologist at Cincinnati General who had seen similar cases before and ordered a specific panel on a hunch. That hunch saved my life. The substance had been introduced into the tea before it reached me. Claudia had prepared that tea. I want to tell you that I was immediately strong, that I processed the information like a board meeting, clinical, focused, strategic. That is not what happened. I lay in that hospital bed for 2 days and did not speak. Not to the detective, not to my attorney who flew in from Nashville, not to my housekeeper who sat in the waiting room for 16 hours and cried more than anyone. I thought about everything I had given Claudia, every sacrifice, every missed school performance, and I did miss them, and I knew it, and it gutted me even then. I thought about the money I spent on her wedding, on her children's private school tuition, on the house in Kenwood I bought them when they outgrew their starter home. I thought about the way she looked that night, so relaxed, so genuinely warm. And then the grief turned into something else entirely. It turned cold. On the third morning, I asked for my attorney, my CFO, and a yellow legal pad, and I started making a list. This is the part of the story where some people might say I should have stopped, should have pressed charges and walked away, should have focused on healing and let the courts handle it. Maybe they're right. But they didn't spend 26 years building something from nothing, having the people they built it for try to kill them for it. The investigation moved quickly once it got moving. What Detective Cole discovered over the next 3 weeks is something I still have trouble wrapping my mind around. Claudia hadn't acted alone. Marcus had known, not just suspected, known for at least 4 months that Claudia and Philip Weston were planning something. He hadn't participated directly, but he had stayed silent. He had looked the other way, because he believed that if I died quietly of what looked like age-related kidney failure, the estate would pass quickly and without scrutiny. But here's the part that twisted the knife the most. Philip Weston wasn't just a fraudulent advisor. He was Claudia's college boyfriend, a man I had never liked, who had disappeared from her life when I had expressed concerns about his character 20 years ago. She had never forgiven me for it. She had reconnected with him 3 years after Danny died. She had been feeding him information about my estate, my health, my daily routines for nearly 4 years. He had convinced her that what they were doing was simply accelerating the inevitable. That is the word he used in the messages the detectives recovered. Inevitable. My daughter had decided I was inevitable. While my attorney and the prosecutors were building their case, my CFO, a woman named Linda Park, who has been with me for 19 years and who I trust more than any person alive, uncovered something else. Marcus, over the previous 2 years, had been systematically moving company assets, small amounts at first, vendor overpayments that bounced back to a shell company, a few falsified expense reports, nothing that would trip the automatic auditing systems on its own. But Linda had been watching. She'd noticed the pattern 6 months before I was hospitalized. She had started documenting it quietly, intending to bring it to me when she had something solid. She had something solid. Marcus had redirected approximately $2.3 million out of Hargrove Events and Hospitality over 18 months. The money had gone to 3 accounts, one of them tied directly to Philip Weston's consulting firm. My son had been funding the scheme that nearly killed me. I sat with Linda in my home office for 3 hours after she told me this. She didn't say much. She just pushed the documentation across the table to me, page by page, and let me read. When I was done, I looked up at her and said, "Give me everything." The criminal trial began 14 months after my hospitalization. I was there every single day. Claudia's defense attorney argued that she was manipulated by Philip Weston, that she was emotionally vulnerable after losing her father, that Weston had groomed her over years into believing I was a threat to her children's financial security, that she didn't fully understand what she was administering. I sat in that courtroom and listened to my daughter's attorney paint me as a cold, distant, workaholic mother whose children had suffered emotional neglect. He used my long work hours as evidence that I had failed them. He implied that my wealth made me a target I had partly created myself by being so absent. There were days I had to grip the arms of my chair to stay still. And then came the day I testified. I walked to that stand and I was calm in a way I had not been since before the hospital. I looked at the jury. I told them about the crackers and the peanut butter, about the second mortgage, about the nights I drove home at 2 a.m, wondering if I was doing the right thing, working instead of being home, and deciding every single time that building something real, something lasting, something that would protect my children was the right choice. I told them what my daughter's tea tasted like. Slightly different that night, a little bitter. I thought it was just a different kind of chamomile. I told them what it felt like to open my eyes in the ICU and understand that the person who had made that tea was the person I had called my daughter for 36 years. I did not cry on that stand. I had made a decision not to. My daughter cried. She turned in her seat and looked at me with tears running down her face, and I looked back at her steadily until she looked away. Philip Weston's attorney tried to argue that the messages were taken out of context, that inevitable referred to estate planning, not harm. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Claudia was convicted of aggravated assault causing serious bodily harm and conspiracy to commit fraud. She was sentenced to 11 years. With good behavior, she could be out in 8. Philip Weston was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. The prosecutor argued his role in orchestrating the scheme elevated the charge. He received 18 years. Marcus was not criminally charged with the assault. There was insufficient evidence to prove he knew the specifics of what Claudia intended to do that night. But the financial crimes were a different matter. He pled guilty to embezzlement and wire fraud to avoid trial. He was sentenced to 4 years and ordered to make full restitution of the $2.3 million. Now here's the part that some people call my revenge. I call it my decision. 3 weeks before the verdict came in, I sat down with my estate attorney and we rewrote everything. I removed both Claudia and Marcus as beneficiaries from my will entirely. I established a trust for their children, my grandchildren, with specific conditions: access to educational funds at 18, a small living stipend, and full inheritance at 35, provided they have no felony convictions and have been financially self-supporting for at least 3 years. The trust is managed by an independent board that neither parents can influence. My estate, the bulk of it, will be divided between 3 organizations: a nonprofit that provides business funding to low-income women entrepreneurs, a culinary arts scholarship fund at the community college where I took my first hospitality course, and a program that provides transitional housing and job training to women leaving the correction system. I also wrote one final document, not a legal document, a letter. I had it delivered to Claudia's attorney to give to her in prison. It said this: I loved you before you were born. I loved you through every year and every failure and every season of your life. I loved you even the night you served me that tea. Love does not require me to forgive this. Love does not require me to leave you what I built. The money is not your punishment. Your actions are your punishment. The money simply belongs somewhere it will do good. Mom. I want to tell you where I am now. I turned 55 last April. My housekeeper, Rosa, made me a chocolate cake and we sat on my back porch and ate it and listened to the birds and didn't say much at all. It was one of the better evenings I've had in recent memory. Linda Park is now president of Hargrove Events and Hospitality. She's running it better than I ever did, honestly. I still consult, I still attend major meetings, but I have learned, perhaps 30 years too late, that presence is not the same as absence. I see my grandchildren when their schedules allow. Their parents, my daughter's husband, who divorced Claudia before the sentencing, cooperates generously. He's a good man. Those children are innocent of everything. People ask me constantly if I regret not forgiving my children, if I wake up at night wondering if I was too harsh, if I feel guilty for redirecting the money. Here is what I actually feel. I feel the tea. Every morning when I make my own tea now, alone in my kitchen, in the quiet before the rest of the world wakes up, I feel it. Not with fear anymore, with clarity. I almost died, and because I didn't, I've had 19 months so far of mornings that are entirely mine, of decisions made for myself, without guilt or obligation, or the particular exhaustion of being resented by people you love. I built a $100 million company. I survived what my children tried to do to me. I rewrote the ending of my own story. And I made myself one more promise the morning I walked out of that hospital, the same promise I made to a tiny face in a hospital room 36 years ago. I promised myself that I would give myself a different life than the one I'd been living. I'm keeping that promise. Thank you for listening.